Good morning. I've decided that on my channel, I would like to put some perspective on just my background and what my feelings are today. And of course, I'm not an orator. I wrote them down. I actually changed colleges because of having to take a speech course. So I know this won't be great as a speech, but I did write it down so that I would remember what I wanted to say and say it how I would have written it, because I did write this. The question I will answer today, in my humble opinion, based on my knowledge and experience gained throughout my unique travels throughout my life, is the Bible the Word of God? First, this is not a religious channel, as such may be. It just so happens that this topic was on my mind based on the current world environment in which we find ourselves today. My perspective built upon my yearning soul longing for peace. A peace that allows people to be themselves and love others for being themselves. I feel I must give some background for you to understand how I got here. From being born into a family of 5 kids, a family that for several years grew up going to church on Sunday and having fried chicken when we returned, which later in my young years turned into a family that heard radio church ministers preaching loudly on the radio every morning before school. A family that, like lots of families during that time, had been preached to over and over about those gay people who were on a path to hell. I was born into an environment with no books about others like me, no one in my family that I could turn to. Not to their discredit at the time, the church was teaching hate. They loved their church. So I learned quite early, to get through this journey, I must hide myself. And so my journey began. I could share my story with no one, not even once I got to school, because then they would know that I was one of those. It may have seemed I wasn't strong, but I was. And it made me depend on me. And that little voice in my head that knew deep down, this is me, and I am loving, and I am caring, and I am gay, and I want to do no one no harm. Back to the preachers blaring about how evil those like me were. Back to the jokes and laughing by those around me when seeing someone suspected of being gay. Back to the I do not throw the ball like I should. Back to the I do not walk right. Back to the no piano lessons are for girls. Back to all the stereotypes that I learned to deal with on my own. As a child, my parents taught that the Bible was the greatest book ever written. And so I read it many times. And when I got to those verses, many verses of Matthew begot Thomas, and Thomas begot so-and-so, and so on and so forth, trying to understand, what is this trying to tell me? I knew there had to be some kind of meaning. This was the greatest book of all after everyone is saying this. That was my first clue. Why would a supreme being put so many begot verses in his word if we are all supposed to have come from Adam and Eve? I do not think he would. What would it matter? But I think that men may, wanting to prove that some men's lineages was greater than others, therefore they could be separated for men's gain. I say those men would have been served well to leave those chapters out. Another clue, my dad and I, in his later years, talked about the Bible and the end times and the book of Revelation, which some believe to be a fortune telling of what is to come. My dad, understand, was in his way very spiritual and tried to stick with his Bible teachings. But with this one, he believed that there was no great end coming, that when each man dies, that is his end. Dad's viewpoint, having grown up in the period before Hitler, and later having served in the military during World War II, were certainly influenced by those periods. He said he remembered as a child sitting in church and the minister was preaching hell and brimstone and the end times are coming, just because all the signs were lining up as foretold in Revelations. Sounds like something the church may be preaching today. And they do say history repeats itself. I say it doesn't have to be that way. He said he felt at times he was not even sure if he would make it home before it happened. I have often heard that history repeats itself, and growing up, I felt with comfort, surely, that Hitler's period would never, ever come again. So surely that saying history repeats itself could not be true. I was thinking that certainly our nation, built on the separation of church and state, and the welcoming of all people wanting to live by the rule of law and the Constitution, could withstand persuasions by religious bodies to elect wealthy men with no regard for the law. That is another point in my opinion. So do I believe that the Bible is the Word of God? No. It is the word of men. Back during the time it was written, co-opted, interpreted into another language, edited, re-edited, added to by other men over the years. Not magic men that can foretell the future. Not men bent on claiming that they were the only ones that had inspired thoughts about what a loving supreme being may be looking for. Not men that could foresee the future and were bent on having others destined to an end that had been told by them, an end that would be disastrous. All created by this loving God. Not by man that during their time were writing down how they viewed the world at that time. A world, might I add, that was not kind to women, among others. So based on my knowledge that I was gay, I came to my own conclusion about those men that wrote the Bible back during their time. There are great loving ideas in the Bible. If the Bible were re-edited today, like in the past, I would leave out all those begot verses. I would be a lot kinder to women. There would certainly be no chapters of any kind that would condone slavery. As written by those men back then and interpreted later by later generations, it is a book bent on making people believe that we are all hell-bent on a catastrophic end. In my mind, I must believe if there is a supreme being, there would be only one. And the confusion and the warmongering is because everybody is trying to prove their God is the biggest and the best. But all these books, all these religions were written by men. So, in my mind, this God would be saying, when are they going to get it? When are they going to realize that there is only one? And all they have to do is love one another. And I said to myself, if this is true, then instead of being warmongering conquerors for God, it would make more sense to try to love one another and prove to this supreme being that we get it. So many times over the years since school shootings began, I have heard people send their thoughts and prayers. I've even heard people recently saying that what is going on in the world is in God's hands. It is all laid out in the Bible. It's like a newspaper. I say no one has ever had a crystal ball. But I say if that is the case, and you agree we all have free will, and we are all built in His image, then we would all be God's hands. And we could all do something about gun safety regulations. And lastly, for anyone that wants to send me text quoting words from the Bible written by other men, just know that I do not believe that the Bible is the Word of God. I believe that the word of supreme being would come from loving beings on this earth who have shared their walk in life and want nothing more than to see more love. Maybe some like the Beatles, Martin Luther King, Oprah, the Dalai Lama, Maya Angelou, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and so many others. Also as an add-on, Christian nationalism would be, in my humble opinion, the worst thing for this nation. This loving nation that has always been accepting of all religions, of whoever their ideal was when they were born into this world, of who this supreme being was. Which it's just possible that we're all speaking to this same one in some form or fashion. I don't care whether you pray to the moon god, the sun god, or whatever god. In my opinion, if there is this supreme being, there would be only one. So all this thing about men coming up with this is the true God, this is the only God, it's just causing catastrophic hatred. The people that created this Project 2025, Christian nationalism, it's time to stop this. The Republican Party in the Senate and House can stop this. History doesn't need to repeat itself. Thank you.